Good morning on this Sunday, August 11th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. They're already getting into it. In the presidential race, Georgia moves from leans Republican to a toss-up after two very different visits from both candidates. Turning back time, the state election board votes to reopen the investigation into the 2020 election, and a state Senate committee is asking questions to Georgia Tech on how it handles transgender athletes. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Brian are all here. They promise to behave. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Pollsters say Georgia is back in play for Democrats after Vice President Kamala Harris entered the race for president. A new poll released by AARP shows former President Trump at 46%, Vice President Harris at 44% here in Georgia. Brian, to you first this week. Former President Trump did not do himself any favors when he came to Atlanta, really taking shots at Governor Kemp, First Lady Marty Kemp, and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. I mean, he was kind of back to his old antics, and that is not a way to win Georgia.
You can only win Georgia with a unified party base plus independents. And what that rhetoric did is cut across the party base, let alone the independents, none of whom were interested. And some of the rhetoric that you saw is something that people don't believe. When you tell Georgians that their city is a killing field, when you say that their economy is just so-so, that's not how Georgians see themselves. They see their economy is doing very well. We're very proud of the Republican leadership that has led to the strong economy. We are a leader in economic development, the #1 state in the nation for business. Our unemployment rate is below 4%. You've got to have messaging that is believable. Donald Trump leads with voters on the issues that they care about the most. That is the immigration crisis, and that is the economy. That's what he needs to be talking about. Anything else is a distraction, anything else is off message, and anything else could cost him in Georgia. As Theron can attest, long before Kamala Harris became the nominee, I was saying these poll numbers are going to close. Trump's not going to lead by 10 going into the election. And we are seeing them close now with a candidate that's got a lot of momentum. We can't have hubris. We have got to be disciplined if we're going to win Georgia. Right now, it's anyone's game.
But Democrats can only hope that Trump keeps up these kinds of attacks.
Yes, and he will. But we also got to make sure that when he does these sort of divisive things, I disagree with what he said about the Kemp family, and for him to attack the family, we all know this, is that usually families are off limits in politics. Now, if the spouse or the child injects themselves into a conversation, then that candidate usually responds, but not in the way that he responded. Now, what we got to do is that, yeah, Brian is right. I've been saying this for a long time, even when Republicans were extremely critical of Kamala Harris. They said that she was bringing down the ticket. They talked about the way she laughed. They talked about the way she looked. They talked about the way she governed. All these things were said. So I think what voters are doing, and this poll reflects it, is that we're unified. We're talking about issues that matter to the American people. Last thing I would say, Lord, I'll be a little shorter this week, is that these numbers are tightening because I think a lot of those independents who were not excited about Biden but don't want to vote for Trump are either saying, hey, I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz now, or I'm kind of back to being kind of undecided, which means that in Georgia, they're gettable for us. And the last thing I would say is Democrats, we got to stop letting the Republicans say that they're going to win Georgia. We got to remind them we won Georgia in 2020, so we are the favorites. They got to come beat us this time.
Phil, what prompted these attacks, and do you agree with Trump's strategy here? I mean, I think the key word that you said was gettable. These voters are now gettable for Democrats.
Well, I think Brian outlined some good points in his comments. Obviously, it's very difficult when you're trying to win a state and it's so tight in this state. We all agree that it's a swing state. And so what started it, to answer your question, was the State Elections Board. We've talked about that on this broadcast for several weeks now. And what happened was John Fervier is the chairman of the board. He's a Kemp appointee, and he has been procedurally blocking the three other Republicans who, and I think they're very reasonable proposals that have been put forward. I don't agree with all of them, but I think a lot of them are reasonable election integrity proposals, and that's been the controversy. And Trump was upset that this Kemp appointee was doing this, and so on the rally that Saturday, he said they were heroes, and the crowd cheered, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, having said that, we're taping on a Friday morning, and the last couple days have been shifted in terms of people who are on good terms with both the former president and the governor are saying, you know what, to the point of both my colleagues here, President Trump, you need to move forward and talk about inflation and open borders and energy independence, and you need to get it right with Governor Kemp, and the same thing has been told to Governor Kemp. And I said, just late Friday morning, I heard Governor Kemp on the radio say that, you know, we're committed to a victory of everybody in Georgia, including the president. And so I think you will see a truce. Now, yes, Trump has to behave, but I think you're going to see a truce again like you saw before that rally. Now, I could be proven wrong very easily, but I think, again, to Brian's point, it's very tight. You need the independents here, and you need to focus on Harris and this far-left ticket that we're facing.
Melita, the question is, can he behave? I mean, I think 3 weeks ago we saw a more disciplined Donald Trump, especially at the debate, but now we're seeing kind of the old Donald Trump return.
Donald Trump, it is impossible for him to behave. He has gone unchecked. He can't stay on his teleprompter remarks. He goes off prompter constantly. He denigrates others. He can't stand not to be in the spotlight, and right now the spotlight is on Harris and her ticket. And then the other thing is his calling her low IQ when she has been the Attorney General for the largest state in the country, when she has been elected the United States Senate from the largest state in the country. That really makes him look bad. And it incites more women to be determined to vote for her. And this is an election where turnout among specific groups is what matters. Kamala Harris's campaign has excited that very valuable 25 to 40-year-old part of the electorate. And when they show up in greater numbers than they traditionally do, they can turn this election, and they are more likely to support her.
That's a good point. Women don't like it when you call them dumb.
Well, and real quick, you know, this
I
whole,
can attest to that. I mean,
yeah, right.
I
And
don't
this whole,
like, that's insulting to me.
Absolutely. And this whole effort that Republicans are saying, oh, we want to go out and recruit black men. The worst thing you can do if you want to get black men on your side is to talk about a black woman. For you to criticize her, call her stupid, and to say that she's not educated. I mean, I would put her education qualifications up against Trump any day.
Right.
And this has been a successful woman in her career in politics.
Going after someone with these kind of personal attacks is a losing scenario and strategy, particularly when it involves the First Lady of Georgia. What we need, as Phil said, is for Brian Kemp and Donald Trump to have some sort of a truce. The comments about Marty made it much more difficult for a husband, not just a governor, but a husband, to then turn around and go, hey, bygones, right? That makes it really hard. And I'll tell you, you have seen the real place in the hearts that Kemp has with Georgia Republicans this week, many stepping out. People who are at the rally stepping out and posting photos, not of the rally, but of them with Governor Kemp at previous events expressing their support. It's great that we're unified on the state level, but Governor Kemp, I was with him on Thursday, and he was like, Brian, I just want to win. I want the Republicans to win. That is, he is single-minded focused. He has the most important grassroots operation in the state, and he is integral to getting our electoral votes back in the red column.
Phil?
Again, a good point. And I think that the Trump campaign out in Mar-a-Lago doesn't fully understand Georgia. And I understand some of the prominent Georgia Republicans, again, both friends of Kemp and Trump, are saying you need to work on your messaging. You need to get with Kemp. And I would not be surprised to Brian's comments. I think that everybody's committed. The great unifier is the radical left. I see where Harris doesn't even put hardly any public policy positions on her website. Why? Because they're so out of touch. And she's talking about she wants to battle inflation. She's the vice president right now. And I think that's what's motivating Republicans and why it's keeping it even, because they're not helping themselves on the Democrat side.
Well, when you want to talk about unity, let's talk about this next quick issue, because I want to get to it. As many of you know, former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, a Republican and one of the most outspoken critics of former President Trump, endorsed Vice President Harris. Phil, back to you. What do you think about the GOP leaders who want to ban him from running for office as a Republican?
Well, I don't think he's a Republican anymore, and I think that that's the signal that's been given by Chairman Josh McCoon of the state Republican Party, that he's a meaningless cipher, he's bitter, and I think it is not logical. Jeff Duncan says, I want to change things and use the Democrat Party as a vehicle, as a conservative. Well, that's stupid. I'm sorry, I know we're not supposed to name call, but it's politically stupid. He's not stupid. He knows what he's doing. He's making a lot of money with CNN. But anyhow, you get change in both parties in primaries and working within your own party.
Alita?
Well, it's lovely to see how unified the Republicans are in Georgia. But I tell you what the Democrats are unified about is the Democrats look at Project 2025 and they are unified in their dissatisfaction with all of those policies the Republicans are pushing. They may try to disallow them, but they are pushing those policies. And this vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz, is he's the helper Mr. Rogers was telling us about all these years, the good guy you find in a crisis.
Brian, I want your final word here on Jeff Duncan.
I don't think that going after Jeff Duncan serves the greater good. We all know that he's not really a Republican anymore. If you say you're for Biden and then you're for Kamala Harris, you're not part of our coalition. I think it's obvious. Let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about the border. Let's focus on those things. And hey, if we're going to be out attacking somebody, why aren't we out drawing a contrast with liberal Democrats in the state and pointing out to voters why we're the better option? That's where we need to be talking about.
Okay,
really quickly, Jeff Duncan has made it very clear, and I want to thank him for doing the right thing. I think doing the right thing for the democracy of this country, to save this country, is to support Joe Biden and now Kamala Harris. But let's make no mistake about it. If you listen to what he's saying, he wants to beat Donald Trump so he can restore the old Republican power.
Which isn't going to happen, right?
But you guys are just out of touch, I believe. I think Jeff Duncan believes that by getting Trump out of the way, you could be able to reform the Republican Party. And he still supports a lot of Republican policies in Congress.
Just real quickly, the Republican Party does need to be transformed from the last five. Why? Because you had the president of the Teamsters for the first time at the Republican convention. You Democrats are upset that the working men and women of this country, as amplified by that Teamster president, are moving over to the Republic. That's the new coalition.
I got to move on. You told me y'all would behave. We behave. You're going over my time. Up next, the state election board votes to investigate once again the 2020 election results.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
4 years after the 2020 election, a newly GOP-aligned election board in Georgia is pushing to reinvestigate Fulton County for its handling of the vote. Georgia's state election board voted 3-2 on Wednesday to ask State Attorney General Chris Carr to investigate the Fulton County government, seeking to reopen an inquiry closed back in May. Phil, to you on this, what do you think about this decision? Do you agree?
I think it was reasonable, but I think it has to have some wiggle room, and there was some in this rulemaking. And my point that I've been consistent on is that Stacey Abrams had every right to question election results, and just as Donald Trump has had every right to question election results. I do think that one of the big issues that the board has been facing and is looking at these challenges are mismatched votes. That is the machine count versus a hand count. I don't see anything wrong if a county has to say, look, let's do a hand count. So we'll see what happens, but I think it was necessary.
Theron?
Look, I think that, and Republicans know this, if you're talking about a 2020 election, you're losing, right? And if you're talking about 2020 election, Democrats are winning. We had investigation after investigation, Lori, inquiry after inquiry, the Attorney General's office, the Secretary of State's office, the committees, all investigated the 2020 elections, particularly Fulton County's handling. Everything came back that they were above board. And let's not forget the 2 black women who were shamefully accused of doing something they didn't do. Their lives have been ruined, right? And unfortunately, they've been able to file a lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani in the Trump campaign. And hopefully they're in the process of restoring their dignity and their families are not being too harmed. And then this is also just a partisan attack. And so I applaud Fulton County for standing up for themselves. I hope Attorney General Chris Carr will do the right thing on this and just say, hey, we need to move on.
Brian, what does Chris Carr do here in this situation?
Well, we're not clear, but we are clear the State Election Board doesn't have the authority to order Chris Carr to do anything, right? That's not part of their...
And if there's an outside attorney, who pays for that?
The state would. So it would have to be done through the Attorney General's office.
Or the board could get their own attorney.
Which is more taxpayer money to investigate 2020.
And
No, it's for going forward. It's for going forward.
But there's a practical question about whether they're even allowed to reinvestigate a case now that it has been closed. So that is something that we're going to do to adjudicate and figure out. But in the spirit of being a friend to everyone, I agree with my friend Theron that if we're talking about 2020, that is not a good strategy.
Well, we're talking about going forward too.
Well,
let's
but
just
you're
stop talking
focusing on
about
2020.
Let's just stop talking about 2020. Let's talk about 2024.
Well, there are cases before this board that involve 2020, whether you like it or not.
Well, that one's been reopened. That one was closed and reopened.
There was new information, though.
And then real quick, the word reasonable. How's that really defined? Because what's reasonable to one county may not be reasonable to another county.
Well, there was a time when members of the State Elections Board steered clear of any appearance of partisanship. Instead, these 3 new members sat on the front row of the Donald Trump rally last week as he lavished praise on them by name just days before they were set to vote on this highly partisan issue and other partisan issues. So this elections board running off in a renegade way and running up legal bills by hiring their own lawyer is something that perhaps needs some parameters, and they probably need some ethics rules for how this very critical board operates.
All right, well, after several controversial weeks, Georgia's school superintendent, the state school superintendent, does an about-face when it comes to AP African-American Studies. Superintendent Richard Wood says the state will now recognize and fund the course. Brian? A total communication failure.
Well, and we transitioned from Chris Carr to Chris Carr because he had to weigh in this week and spell out what the state law says here, that when it comes to the divisive concepts law that we passed 2 years ago, AP courses are explicitly carved out of that. As has been said here on the show before, there are other AP courses that have to do with certain racial or ethnic groups that are already available in Georgia. This is a group of folks who are 30% of our population. It makes sense that we would have this course. And one thing I really like about these AP courses is if our high school students can take these courses, they then get college credit. And that means taxpayers aren't paying for those classes for them when they're in college. So it's a win-win. I'm glad he reversed course. I know it's hard to eat crow. I know it's hard to do. But at the end of the day, we got to the right place. We had a good public conversation about this and came to a good public policy conclusion.
And Theron, I hope this is the last week we have to talk about this.
Well, I hope so too. And I saw Attorney General Chris Carr at the Georgia Chamber Congressional Luncheon. Shout out to the Chamber, great event. And I went up to him and I thanked the Attorney General for doing the right thing. Now, because of his ruling, Georgia students will be able to take this AP African American History course. Now, what the superintendent did, he can't unring that bell. And so Alicia Searcy wrote a really good op-ed in AJC about this. And a lot of lawmakers and principals that I'm talking to think that this fight is not over. And so while the AG did the right thing, we still got to make sure that we hold the superintendent accountable and not do something like this again.
Phil.
Lori, it goes back to what you just said a minute ago, a terrible communication PR mess. Why not go to the Attorney General before you make this decision? Could I get an informal opinion and what can I say or do? And then, as we all have discussed on the gang, it was totally fouled up. So he needs to go to PR 101.
Alita.
Well, what I do like about the outcome is that it's a great demonstration that advocacy works, that we should listen to students, that we should listen to teachers, and as school starts back up, what a great civics lesson for all those high school students who have that course to look at this and see that their voice matters and that raising their voice can make a difference.
And maybe they'll work that into that curriculum. All right, thanks everybody. Up next, a special state Senate committee takes aim at Georgia Tech when it comes to transgender athletes. We'll discuss after the break.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
A special state committee is targeting Georgia Tech, demanding the university hand over all documents related to its handling of transgender athletes. Now, the committee's focus is on the NCAA swim championship that Georgia Tech hosted 2 years ago, where transgender athlete Leah Thomas competed, sparking a controversial debate. All right, I guess, Brian, we'll start with you on this. What is this committee trying to get at? What is the purpose of the committee?
This is an ongoing issue for voters, and it's not necessarily one that when you ask them what's most important to you that they say is top of mind. But when you ask them their opinion on it, they agree with Georgia Republicans that biological men should not be competing in women's sports. Liberals keep telling us that this isn't a real thing, that this isn't really happening, and all of America has watched it happen in the Olympic boxing. We all saw it happen at Georgia Tech with that NCAA swim meet. And when you see it, the visual is so stark, it strikes you, and you have this emotional reaction to it. And yet liberals keep telling us this isn't a real thing. And we can see it with our eyes, just like we could with Joe Biden when they said everything was fine. We're seeing it, and they're telling us we're seeing something wrong. It's a real issue, and Democrats are wrong on it.
Melita, Democrats wrong on this issue?
Well, I do think that the legislature may be overreaching by trying to tell the NCAA how to operate college athletics. So, I mean, there's a reason that the University System Board of Regents takes the budget for colleges and universities to keep politics out of educational policy. And I'm not certain that a legislative committee needs to start meddling in how the NAACP handles college sports. Do we really want them, the Georgia General Assembly, setting rules for college athletes?
Phil?
Well, the Georgia General Assembly represent the people of Georgia, and conservatives, Republicans, and a whole heck of other people without any label don't want men and women's sports. And this is it's a cultural value that I think the large majority of Georgians are for, and I think that the legislature and the Board of Regents have every right, and I applaud State Senator Greg Dolezal, who was one of the drivers of this. Yes, let's study this and let's get the policy right. And I think we're talking privacy here too for athletes, especially for women and men who don't like this new propaganda that's come out from the liberals.
The Georgia High School Association has delved into this and made some rules about this, and now the legislature is examining it. So it's an issue that's not going away.
Yeah, right, and as B-Rob mentioned, we've been talking about it a lot. I do respectfully disagree that a lot of people I talk to, this is not one of their major issues. And so this fact that all Georgia voters want to talk about this and it's at the top of their list is not true. Now, it is at the top of the list for a lot of these.
That's what he said. He said it's not at the top of the list.
No, I'm sorry, it's not at the top. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought you said it was at the top. Okay, all right, so you're right. So, but what we got to also do is understand that it does motivate a particular base of the Republican Party. And there are some Republicans who want this issue to come forward. And then, as you mentioned, there has been steps that have been taken. And that's also gives Georgia Tech the benefit of the doubt. Let's just hypothetically say that they are going to turn over information that shows that there were processes and procedures taken care of. And then last about Chairman Dolezal. He's a friend. I know him very well. And I would just encourage him, and I said this to him, personally, is that just come to this approach with a level of empathy, because there are families out there. We have less than about 1% of a country that are transgender, and there are families who make these decisions, and just make sure you come with that empathy and understanding as you ask these questions.
I would just say one thing: we need to protect women's sports, and I applaud the Republicans and every politician to protect women's sports and their privacy.
Melita?
Well, I agree that we should protect women's sports. I just wish that the people who govern the sports would handle it without making it a partisan issue.
And I agree with that. And
it's a common sense issue.
But I am for protecting women's sports, and I'm actually pro this conversation. But how we, do it, and to Malia's point, do we attack the NCAA? Does Georgia Tech feel they're going to get a fair and proper hearing to produce the information? And what's the plan going forward? It's got to be all in the equation.
Brian, final word.
It's not top. It's something that parents care about. Mm-hmm. When you talk to them, the people who are living with it, who have daughters on the swim team or on the basketball team, this is something very personal to them, and it's not theoretical. And I would say it's not Republicans who made this an issue. No one talked about this 10 years ago, and all of a sudden it has become pushed in our face, and that's how Republicans feel, and I think they're reacting to that.
All right, we'll leave it there, folks. Coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
We'll start with you.
Okay, great. I've got a loser, and it's the Democratic vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz. And it's this about stolen valor. Georgia's a big state for veterans. I'm a veteran. I was offended, like a lot of my brothers and sisters who served, and even the Harris campaign site had to scrub his bio because he was, even CNN said he lied about his rank, he lied about his service. He was never in war, he never carried a gun in wartime. That's a disgrace. That's going to hurt, I think, the Democratic ticket. And I mentioned the chairman of the State Elections Board, John Furvey. Couldn't he work with the other folks on the board rather than trying to hinder things?
Melita?
I think those charges have been somewhat discredited, and I think he served honorably for 24 years.
We're going to move it on. And winners
My
and losers.
winners are the people who responded so well to the flooding along the Georgia coast, and my loser would be all of those people in the 2025, Project 2025, who want to downsize the NOAA and National Weather Service.
All right, Theron.
All right, for the second time, I think Brian is going to recognize the Olympic winners, so he'll do that. But first, I want to do Marta, who just won an Outstanding Public Transportation System Award with the American Public Transportation Association. And then also want to give my condolences to the Georgia Aquarium CEO, Brian Davis, who tragically passed away this week. I offer my condolences to his family, and definitely will, his legacy will live on. He's a great man. I didn't know him extremely well personally, but a lot of friends have called me this week to just talk about what he meant to their life and his legacy going forward.
And really a huge advocate for animals both
Correct.
inside and outside the aquarium. Brian.
Laurie, on a week where we've had so much drama in this state, I want to be positive where I can.
Thank you.
I want to make my winners the Georgians who have served at the Olympics, those who live here, those who were born here, like Gabby, and Coco Golf was born here as well, but Brody from Polk County. They have made us so proud, and they're great Americans. I love seeing them wear the flag when they win the medals. And my other winner is Georgia State University, which has gotten worldwide attention for one full week and a lot of free media.
All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.